The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams. Chapter 18. The main reception foyer was almost empty, but Ford nevertheless weaved his way through it. Zaphod grasped him firmly by the arm and manoeuvred him into a cubicle standing to one side of the entrance hall. "What are you doing to him?" asked Arthur. "Sobering him up," said Zaphod, and pushed a coin into a slot. Lights flashed, gases whirled. "Hi," said Ford, stepping out a moment later. "Where are we going?" "Down to the car park. Come on." "What about the personal time teleports?" said Ford. "Get us straight back to the heart of gold." "Yeah, but I've cooled on that ship. Zarni Whoop can have it. I don't want to play his games. Let's see what we can find." A Sirius Cybernetics Corporation Happy Vertical People Transporter took them down deep into the substrata beneath the restaurant. They were glad to see it had been vandalised and didn't try to make them happy as well as take them down. At the bottom of the shaft, the lift doors opened and a blast of cold, stale air hit them. The first thing they saw on leaving the lift was a long concrete wall with over 50 doors in it, offering lavatory facilities for all 50 major life forms. Nevertheless, like every car park in the galaxy throughout the entire history of car parks, this car park smelled predominantly of impatience. They turned a corner and found themselves on a moving catwalk that traversed a vast, cavernous space that stretched off into the dim distance. It was divided off into bays, each of which contained a spaceship belonging to one of the diners upstairs. Some smallish and utilitarian mass-production models, others vast shining limo ships, the playthings of the very rich. Zaphod's eyes sparkled with something that may or may not have been avarice as he passed over them. In fact, it's best to be clear on this point. Avarice is definitely what it was. "There he is," said Trillian. "Marvin, down there." They looked where she was pointing. Dimly they could see a small metal figure listlessly rubbing a small rag on one remote corner of a giant silver sun cruiser. At short intervals along the moving catwalk, wide transparent tubes led down to floor level. Zaphod stepped off the catwalk into one of these and floated gently downwards. The others followed. Thinking back to this later, Arthur Dent thought it was the single most enjoyable experience of his travels in the galaxy. "Hey, Marvin," said Zaphod, striding over towards him. "Hey, kid, we're pleased to see you." Marvin turned, and in so far as is possible for a totally inert metal face to look reproachful, this is what it did. "No, you're not," it said. "No one ever is." "Suit yourself," said Zaphod, and turned away to ogle the ships. Ford went with him. Only Trillian and Arthur actually went up to Marvin. "No, really, we are," said Trillian, and patted him in a way that he disliked intensely. "Hanging around waiting for us all this time." 576,000,003,579 years, said Marvin. "I counted them." "Well, here we are now," said Trillian, feeling quite correctly in Marvin's view that it was a slightly foolish thing to say. "The first 10 million years were the worst," said Marvin, "and the second 10 million years, they were the worst too. The third 10 million I didn't enjoy at all. After that, it went into a bit of a decline." He paused just long enough to make them feel they ought to say something, and then interrupted. "It's the people you meet in this job that really get you down," he said, and paused again. Trillian cleared her throat. "Is that—" "The best conversation I had was over 40 million years ago," continued Marvin. Again the pause. "Oh, and that was with your coffee machine." He waited. "That's it." "You don't like talking to me, do you?" said Marvin in a low, desolate tone. Trillian talked to Arthur instead. Further down the chamber, Ford Prefect had found something of which he very much liked the look. Several such things, in fact. "Zaphod," he said in a quiet voice, "just look at some of these little star trolleys." Zaphod looked and liked. The craft they were looking at was in fact pretty small but extraordinary, and very much a rich kid's toy. It was not much to look at. It resembled nothing so much as a paper dart about 20 feet long, made of thin but tough metal foil. At the rear end was a small horizontal two-man cockpit. It had a tiny charm drive engine, which was not capable of moving it at any great speed. The thing it did have, however, was a heat sink. The heat sink had a mass of some 2,000 billion tons and was contained within a black hole mounted in an electromagnetic field situated halfway along the length of the ship, and this heat sink enabled the craft to be manoeuvred to within a few miles of a yellow sun, there to catch and ride the solar flares that burst out from its surface. Flare riding is one of the most exotic and exhilarating sports in existence, and those who can dare and afford to do it are amongst the most lionised men in the galaxy. It is also, of course, stupefyingly dangerous. Those who don't die riding it invariably die of sexual exhaustion at one of the Daedalus Club's après-flare parties. Ford and Zaphod looked and passed on. "And this baby," said Ford, "the tangerine star buggy with the black sunbusters." Again, the star buggy was a small ship, a tautly misnamed one in fact, because one thing it couldn't manage was interstellar distances. Basically, it was a sporty planet hopper, dolled up to look like something it wasn't. Nice lines, though. They passed on. The next one was a big 130 yards long, a coach-built limo ship, and obviously designed with one aim in mind, that of making the beholder sick with envy. The paintwork and accessory detail clearly said, "Not only am I rich enough to afford this ship, I am also rich enough not to take it seriously." It was wonderfully hideous. "Just look at it," said Zaphod. "Multi-cluster quark drive Perspex running boards. Got to be a Laszlo Lyricon custom job." He examined every inch. "Yes," he said. "Look, the infra-pink lizard emblem on the neutrino cowling. Laszlo's trademark. The man has no shame." "I was passed by one of those mothers once, out by the Axel Nebula," said Ford. "I was going flat out and the thing just strolled past me. Star drive hardly ticking over. Just incredible." Zaphod whistled appreciatively. 10 seconds later," said Ford, "it smashed straight into the third moon of Jaglon Beta." "Yeah, right. Amazing looking ship, though. Looks like a fish, moves like a fish, steers like a cow." Ford looked around the other side. "Hey, come see," he called out. "There's a big mural painted on this side. A bursting sun, disaster area's trademark. This must be Hot Black's ship. Lucky old bugger. They do this terrible song, you know, which ends with a stun ship crashing into the sun. Meant to be an amazing spectacle. Expensive in stun ships, though." Zaphod's attention, however, was elsewhere. His attention was riveted on the ship standing next to Hot Black Desiato's limo. His mouth hung open. "That," he said, "that is really bad for the eyes." Ford looked. He, too, stood astonished. It was a ship of classic, simple design, like a flattened salmon, 20 yards long, very clean, very sleek. There was just one remarkable thing about it. "It's so black," said Ford Prefect. "You can hardly make out its shape. Light just seems to fall into it." Zaphod said nothing. He had simply fallen in love. The blackness of it was so extreme that it was almost impossible to tell how close you were standing to it. "Your eyes just slide off it," said Ford in wonder. It was an emotional moment. He bit his lip. Zaphod moved forward to it slowly, like a man possessed, or more accurately, like a man who wanted to possess. His hand reached out to stroke it. His hand stopped. His hand reached out to stroke it again. His hand stopped again. "Come and feel this surface," he said in a hushed voice. Ford put his hand out to feel it. His hand stopped. You can't," he said. "See," said Zaphod, "it's just totally frictionless. This must be one mother of a mover." He turned to look at Ford seriously. At least one of his heads did. The other stayed gazing in awe at the ship. "What do you reckon, Ford?" he said. "You mean, Ford looked over his shoulder.